Hi, welcome to Leadership at the Forefront of COVID. I'm Dr. Pendo, the Senior Medical Director for Experience of Caring at Intermountain Healthcare, and I'm excited today to be speaking with Dr. Morissa Henn. She is the Community Health Director at Intermountain Healthcare.
Thanks, great to be with you.
How did you know to say yes, and what did you know to say yes to?
Yeah, well, I'm lucky enough that I get to think about issues of public health and of mental well-being every day. But it was clear when COVID hit that this was unprecedented, that this was a mass crisis event that was going to be with us for a long time. And so as we began gathering and being part of incident command conversations, we realized we needed to set up structures and supports, not only for our caregivers and for our patients, but for the wider community that could help people to manage the intense stresses that so many people are under. You know, I think what's challenging about COVID-19 is the very things we're doing in a public health sense to prevent transmission of the disease, things like social distancing and closing businesses and schools. Those are also things that can contribute to a sense of emotional or psychological distress. And so this was a challenging mix, and we know from past disasters that oftentimes the effects of these issues last for a very long time, often beyond the actual public health crisis itself. And so I think that moment of coming together to say, this is unprecedented, but we have the collaborations, the relationships, the resources we can weave together was the moment at which we realized this was a huge opportunity for improving mental well-being at a challenging time.
Tell us a little bit about who you pulled together to create the emotional health relief hotline and supports for not just the caregivers at Intermountain, but for our community as a whole.
I think what normally we think would have taken maybe 4 or 5 months to set up really happened in about 4 or 5 days. And there were just so many unsung heroes from compliance and legal and beyond. But we also had so much collaboration from outside the organization. The Department of Human Services, the governor's office, the University of Utah that runs our crisis systems in the state, all saying, we're in this with you, how can we complement services? And so that was how this emotional health relief hotline was born. And in the past, it's been almost 6 months of service. You know, we've served about over 3,000 callers who have diverse needs. Some are at really high levels of acute distress. Others are just really feeling the weight of this challenging time and want a reassuring voice or an app or a connection to care. And so we're there to help anyone, and to do so in a way that's warm, that's non-judgmental, and that really looks to provide a sense of normalcy when we're all experiencing this tumultuous period.
That's so impressive. And that timeline is, when I hear you say it in 4 to 5 days, that's just tremendous. So let's shift a little bit from thinking about how we take care of our community and our caregivers. As you think about how you care for yourself, how do you know what to do and when to do it?
Yeah, I think the idea of self-care, which I have to give you a big shout out, Anne, because I think you've led our system and taught so much of what we all know about the importance of caring for ourselves in order to be there for others. I think, you know, something I realized right away was just going to be that this was going to rock us. Even those of us who have incredible privilege, like I do, you know, our worlds in many ways are turned upside down. We may be far from family. Our routines have been disrupted. And so I think one of the things, as I've talked with many mental health experts and clinicians, is just the importance of trying to maintain some semblance of routine in one's life. Even making a schedule, engaging kids in that activity, and also continuing to do things you love, remembering that there are so many activities, whether it's, you know, exercise or painting or something else that we can continue doing and adapting. And then finally, remembering to connect with others. And I think this has been such an interesting time as we've watched, families come together in new ways. I know with my family, where we are on, thousands of miles from each other, connecting over Zoom, celebrating holidays in new ways, it's in many ways brought us closer. And so I think those ideas of human connection and maintaining a hopeful mindset that the world is not ending. This is a very difficult time, but we will get through this. We've utilized many of our coping skills in past difficult times as individuals, and so now is a chance to do the same. I also want to add that I think as leaders, something you've taught us, Anne, is the importance of being vulnerable, of acknowledging that this is a time of uncertainty. And the human brain does not like uncertainty or ambiguity. It really it mobilizes the amygdala, the part of the brain that senses threat, to get really activated and to say, whoa, there's something going on here that could really jeopardize our safety and our survival. And I think in the workplace, this sense of kind of activated stress and sense of threat can be an issue for many people. And I think what we're learning to do as leaders is to recognize that we all feel that way, and we need to share our stories, our struggles, to get sleep and to keep things feeling normal, and make others feel validated in the fact that none of us has it together. We're all doing the very best we can to get through this hour, this day, this week. And I think that's something lasting in terms of a leadership competency that we across the system, I hope, will keep near and dear to us as we look to really become authentic and fully present for our teams.
So in our last little bit of time together, thinking about these last 4 months, 6 months, and thinking about you as a person and then you as a leader, what would you say you've learned, and what would you want to share, or what would you want our audience to know about leading in this time of uncertainty?
Yeah, well, I think first is just to recognize this incredible, unusual moment we're in. The fact that we are collectively experiencing a large-scale traumatic event, and that it is normal for things to feel very different and very strange. And I think what I've personally learned is how important it is to really be present with that discomfort. Not only just the discomfort of working in new ways, solving new problems that maybe hadn't been on our plates before, but also saying, what are some of the other complex issues in our world that we need to be leaning into? For me, the work around racial equity has been a huge focus in the last few months. And I think since the killing of George Floyd and so many other Black and brown people, our country, we've been rocked in so many ways that I think this sense of collective heartbreak, this awareness of the same inequalities that drive the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on communities of color being really present as we think through the mental health burden that's unequally carried by minority communities. I mean, these issues are intertwined, and there's no silver bullets. They require sustained, uncomfortable, really dynamic conversation and action. And I think that has been one of the things I've found most meaningful, is just feeling a little more brave and supported by the system in engaging in some of these complex, intertwined issues. I think the other thing that I've learned is just as we begin to transition to some sort of new normal, the importance of thinking both short and long term. There's an author, Ron Heifetz, who I like, who refers to this as getting on the dance floor and going to the balcony. And, I think this idea of sort of zeroing in on the day-to-day micro issues, but then also remembering as leaders to take a step back and sort of examine the bigger, more macro dynamics is really key. Because even with the Emotional Health Relief Hotline, the challenge we're grappling with now is, how do we build this into a future service that goes well beyond COVID to become a single point of entry for anyone experiencing behavioral health issues in our community, to get them to care, to assess their needs, and to sort of be a hub of virtual connection. And I think figuring out that future vision while also keeping the day-to-day going is hard, but it's also a really exciting challenge to get to take on.
Thanks, Morissa. And it's inspiring to know that we've got great minds like yours thinking about the short term and the long term. So thank you so much for being with us today on our Leadership in at the Forefront of COVID. I'm Ann Pendo, and we'll talk to you soon.